Several weeks back, I got home from a work trip like late on a Friday afternoon, and I thought, you know what? I don't want to cook dinner tonight. I am going to go by Olive Garden and get food to go for my family. So I text them. I'm like, hey, text me what you want from the Olive Garden. Put the order in. Bam, $109. That's kind of crazy, right? So this week, what I have done for you is I have made a week of dinners for you that you can make. These are all restaurant Copycat recipes, and the total for all 5 dinners for your family of 4 is just $93. You can find the whole meal plan on my Substack in a handy dandy printable. I'll leave that link in the description box below, but here's what we are gonna make this week. So we are making Stouffer's Copycat French bread pizza. So if you like the Stouffer's French bread pizza, the sauce kind of tastes almost exactly like the frozen version, except you can make way more for way less. We're also making Olive Garden chicken gnocchi soup. This is one of my kids' favorites that they always get whenever we go to Olive Garden or whenever I order it. And you make the whole pot of soup with leftovers for under $17. We're also making a Copycat recipe for Boston Market meatloaf with mashed potatoes and peas. And then this one was really fun and probably the easiest of the week. It's a Wendy's Copycat Asiago Ranch Chicken Club. So good and so easy. And then lastly, the Quesadilla Explosion Salad, I think is what they call it at Chili's. Basically, it's like a fajita marinated chicken. You serve it over a salad with this black bean and corn mixture and cheese quesadillas. So if you're looking for ways to get your family to eat more salads for dinner, my tip is to put a quesadilla on the side of the salad. All right, so we're gonna get started on our Copycat Stouffer's French bread pizzas. So if you're really short on time, just use like jarred or canned pizza sauce or marinara sauce. I am going to make mine, which you can do ahead of time. So I've just got a small saucepan here with a couple tablespoons of olive oil, a couple tablespoons of chopped white onion, and then I'm going to add about 4 cloves of garlic that I'm gonna crush in there. I really love this garlic crusher. It's the OXO brand. It's definitely a workhorse. It works really well. I've had it for years. That's one of the things I feel like I need to talk more about, but you know, quality kitchen utensils, you might pay a little more for them up front. Not even this one. I feel like it's like 10 bucks, but in general, you know, like pots and pans and stuff like that, you might pay a little more in general up front, but like most of these things are gonna last you a lifetime, right? Okay, so once it starts to brown a little bit, I'm gonna add 1 6-ounce can of tomato paste. I'm just gonna stir this around a bit because it's canned tomato paste, especially when you kind of wake it up with the heat with that onion and garlic, it's gonna taste a little bit better. All right, and then I've got some freeze-dried basil. I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of that, a teaspoon of regular dried oregano. Okay, and then I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt, about a half a teaspoon of pepper, and then let's slowly pour in 1.5 cups of water, whisking this or stirring it rather so the sauce can incorporate a bit. Then we're adding 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then I'm not gonna measure this, but maybe like half a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. Sounds like a weird ingredient, but it just kind of counteracts the acidity of the tomatoes a little bit and gives it a little deeper flavor. Okay, so this is the point where we have to let it come to a simmer and let it bubble for a little bit, like, I don't know, 5 to 8 minutes or something like that. You really wanna taste it at this point and make sure that you like the flavor well after it simmers for a little bit. Obviously, once it's on the pizzas, you're not gonna be able to adjust it. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to put together some of these French bread pizzas. So I got a 1-pound block of the whole mozzarella cheese from Walmart. I really like this. It takes a little bit of extra effort, not much though. I mean, you can just shred it super quickly on a box grater, but one of the good things about like whole mozzarella is that it has such a better flavor. Typically the pre-grated mozzarella, well, number 1, it doesn't melt as well because it's covered in starch, but then number 2, it's typically part skim, which is fine. Like if you want to use that for a quick weeknight meal, it's fine. But look, I just shredded that in like less than a minute. And then I got a big loaf of French bread. So this is obviously enough, more than enough probably for 4 people. I'm not gonna make all of this tonight, so what I'm probably gonna do is just do 2/3 of this loaf. I'll save the rest One thing you can do also is like prep these ahead of time and then just have them in the freezer to bake whenever you want them, just like the regular Stouffer's French bread pizzas. Obviously, you'll have to add time to the baking if you're baking them from frozen versus baking them from fresh. I've got a baking tray here that I just covered with foil just to protect it. And then I've got some softened butter here. So you'll probably need about, I don't know, a little less than a tablespoon per pizza, but you just want to kind of spread that butter thinly on that slice of French bread. Also, if you have like leftover, you know, hoagie rolls or buns or anything like that, this would work in place of that also. I feel like it would also work really well on bagels, like bagel pizzas. Okay, so once you've got your butter spread on there, you're just gonna take a little bit of garlic powder, like a pinch per slice, and season them. You don't wanna add too much because you don't wanna overpower. And then this is what my sauce looks like after it's done. So again, you can make this ahead of time, store it in the fridge. I did add, I don't know, probably like a teaspoon of extra sugar. Again, you have to taste it because depending on, you know, what brand or kind of tomato paste that you use, your seasonings are gonna vary, okay? All right, so we've got our sauce on there, and then I'm just gonna add however much cheese you want to each one. Okay, so we got the cheese on. And obviously this recipe is written just for pepperoni, but you can add anything that you want to these. If you wanna do sausage, if you want to add veggies and make a supreme pizza, do whatever you want. So we're just gonna go ahead and add pepperoni to the top. I guess technically if you wanted to make these, you know, proper Stouffer's pizzas, you would quarter the pepperonis because I think that that's how they come on the pizzas that come in the freezer. However, the French bread pizzas are much smaller than these, so that's probably why they quarter the pepperoni. Well, they probably also quarter it so that they get away with adding less, but you know, whatever. Okay, and then we'll just take the extra cheese and put a little bit over top of each one. And then you wanna bake these at 425 for like 15 to 17 minutes or until they're browned and cooked through. I mean, obviously they're already cooked, so you're browning them at this point. Here's how the pizzas look when they come out of the oven. This recipe is so good, I can't really explain it adequately. The sauce just really adds something, so highly recommend you make this. It's super delicious and quick. All right, we're making meatloaf. I am so tired. I'm so tired of the meatloaf slander. I love meatloaf, and I'm tired of everyone talking about how they don't like meatloaf. I'm kidding. So people like meatloaf. It's fine. I feel like it gets a bad rap. But anyway, in this bowl here, I have 2 pounds of ground beef. I'm gonna add like half a can of tomato sauce, like, yeah, about a little less than half a can. This is like a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. I'm also going to add about 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs. These are just plain dry breadcrumbs. And then I'm gonna add 1 egg and 1 egg yolk. I'll just separate the egg with my hand. And then we're gonna add salt, probably about, I would say well, this is a half a teaspoon. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. We're gonna do about a half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. Meatloaf is kind of hard because you can't taste it, right? Because it's raw. But we're gonna do onion powder and garlic powder. So about a teaspoon of onion powder and then about half a teaspoon of garlic powder. And then I like to add some Worcestershire sauce. I feel like, well, I'm not measuring it, but about a tablespoon. And then to kind of moisten those breadcrumbs up, a couple tablespoons of milk. A lot of times when I'm making meatloaf, I will do it in a stand mixer if I'm making like a huge batch, but I just use my stand mixer to make banana bread. I want to drag it out again, so I'm just gonna put on some gloves and mush up this mixture with my hands. You obviously don't need gloves. I just find that, like, especially if you have rings on or nails, it's kind of lessens the annoyance of washing your hands. But one thing I will say about meatloaf is that, like, if it is seasoned properly, as you're mixing it up, it should smell like what's in it, okay? So like, I can smell the tomato, I can smell the Worcestershire, I can smell the onion powder and the garlic powder. You don't want to overmix this, but I do find that people kind of preach that a little bit too much because obviously you've got egg in here. You want to make sure that it's well incorporated. You want to make sure that all the breadcrumbs are in there, moistened. Okay, and then what I like to do is, well, I was trying to think if I wanted to do this into 2 loaves, because what I do is I do free-form loaves on a baking sheet. I think that's what I'm gonna do, because a lot of times my kids will eat something different than this, and then I can easily freeze the leftover. So I'm just gonna divide it into 2 equal portions, and then we'll shape those into loaves here on a sheet pan. And then every good meatloaf needs a sauce on top when you bake it. So I'm gonna put the rest of the can of tomato sauce in here. That's about a cup, a little less than a cup. 2 tablespoons of sugar, which I spilled some. And then I like to put, I don't know, like a heaping 1/4 cup of barbecue sauce. And then we're also gonna season that with salt and pepper. About 1/2 teaspoon of salt, maybe 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, because obviously the tomato sauce is unseasoned. And then we'll just whisk this together. And then this is what we're gonna use to glaze the top of the meatloaves, along with some strips of bacon, which will cook in the oven along with the meatloaf. All right, so I've got a rimmed baking sheet here lined with some foil. I'm just gonna spray that with some cooking spray. Make sure, if you're gonna make meatloaf like this, that you're using a rimmed baking sheet and not a completely flat one, because there is gonna be grease that comes out of this. And that's one of the reasons why I like to make it on a sheet pan, is so that when you're, you know, cooking the meatloaf in the oven, it's not just like swimming in its own grease. So I'm just gonna take my 2 loaves here, and then you just kind of wanna pat these into equal shapes. Kind of think about, as you're cutting them into slices, how you want them to end up. And then try to kind of, as much as you can, make them about the same size, so that they'll cook evenly. Okay, just like that. And then we've got our sauce. This is probably a little bit more than we need, but that's fine. It'll make sure that our meatloaves aren't dry. So you're just gonna want to pour it over top. This is also going to help it from getting dry in the oven. If there's extra, that's fine. It'll just go down onto the baking sheet. Okay, so I've got 5 slices of bacon that I just cut in half. And we're just going to kind of drape these over the meatloaves. So it's just big enough that you can have 5 like half slices on each one. I'm making a mess, but you know what? It's still going to cook together and be delicious. Okay, and then last step is I just want to take like a little bit of brown sugar over the slices of bacon, less than a tablespoon per meatloaf, okay? It's not a lot. You don't need a lot. It's just going to kind of help that bacon caramelize on the top and mix with the smokiness with a little bit of sweetness. It's going to be delicious. How big you kind of have these and how thick you have them is going to depend. I'll end up putting the total time in the recipe, but if you really want to be accurate, use a thermometer, use a meat thermometer. But I'm gonna put these in the oven at 375. I'm gonna start with like 40 minutes. We'll probably need a little bit more, but we'll just check them at that point. Okay, so beef meatloaf is done when it's 160, and I just checked these. Actually, they're a little bit probably overdone. They're 165, but all in all, very good. I'm gonna let those rest. So I decided to serve this meatloaf with some mashed potatoes and peas, but you can use whatever is easiest. I just boiled some russet potatoes and mashed them with milk and salt and pepper and butter. It was really good, really filling. Tonight for dinner, we have probably the easiest meal out of this bunch. And you know what? Haters might say it's not cooking, but sometimes you need like legitimately a 20-minute thing you can throw together after work and not have to worry about DoorDash. Here it is. All right, so we are doing some Copycat Wendy's crispy chicken sandwiches. I actually don't even know if they still have these on the menu anymore. It's like the Asiago chicken club or whatever. So I've got some chicken fillets. You can get any brand that you want. We really like these. I get them at Walmart. And then I have a bag of potato wedges. So I've got my baking sheets there. We're just gonna pop those in the oven. And then for the sandwiches, I've got some lettuce, bacon, some Asiago cheese, buns, ranch dressing, and tomatoes. And I'm gonna give you guys a hack for cooking this bacon that's super easy and quick and still delicious. Okay, so the potatoes cook at 425 and the chicken cooks at 400. So we're just gonna overcorrect to 425. Everything will be fine. And it should take around 20-25 minutes total. Sometimes I find I have to do the frozen fries and stuff a little bit extra because I like them crispy. Okay, and then our chicken. I'm gonna go ahead and cook all 6 because I have teenagers and sometimes they want seconds. And then if we don't eat them, I'll just stick them in the fridge and then you can like crisp them back up in the air fryer to make salads if you know, want with the leftover chicken. Okay, I'm gonna put the chicken on the bottom rack because that tends to be the hottest area. And then typically when I'm cooking stuff like this, I will switch the racks around about halfway through. Okay, so for the lettuce, we're gonna use a little bit of this for the sandwiches tonight. And then the other part is going to go into some salads that we're gonna make later in the week. So what I like to do when I'm not gonna use all of the lettuce right away is just keep the leaves as whole as possible, because the more cut edges that you have on your lettuce, the more they will brown. And I'm just sticking this in my salad spinner. And then I'll fill this up with cold water and just let it sit and soak and kind of rehydrate while I'm cooking. Cooking. All right, so I got this microwave bacon cooker from Amazon. And honestly, I was extremely skeptical, right? Like, I mean, obviously I've cooked bacon in the microwave before, but I just don't do it super often. But I've used this thing several times now and I really like it. I think that it's a great way to crisp up bacon. It works great. Sometimes you have to, I'm gonna cut this in half up. And the bacon will obviously shrink down, so you can put it super close together if you want. Okay, and then you just stick this in the microwave for like 3 or 4 minutes. 4 minutes is sometimes too much, but okay, there we go. Okay, and then let's cut up some of our Asiago. Obviously, you're not gonna use this all either. I think I'm gonna... What happened to the grapes? What do you mean, what's wrong with them? If there's bad ones, you just have to throw those out. If you can find like sandwich slices of Asiago, I think that would be a lot easier, but I live in a pretty small town and that's not gonna happen here, so I just bought the regular block. Okay, and then I'm just gonna slice up my tomatoes. Apparently I need to sharpen my knife. And anytime I slice up tomatoes for, you know, a salad or sandwich or anything, I always like to season them with salt and pepper. So this helps them be a little bit more flavorful. Okay, so season these, a little bit of salt, pepper. Okay, we're gonna spin this lettuce dry. All right, I'm just gonna set aside some of this lettuce for today. And then the rest of this, I'm gonna let it dry on a layer of paper towels and then put it in the fridge. Okay, so the chicken is done. Potatoes are done. Our bacon is done. It looks prettier actually when you leave it in long strips and don't cut it up like I did, but whatever. And then we're just gonna build our sandwiches. All right, here's our Asiago crispy chicken sandwich. We've got the lettuce, chicken, cheese, tomato, bacon, ranch, and our potato wedges. Next up, we're making chicken gnocchi soup. This is an Olive Garden Copycat, and it is so good. If you make any recipe out of this week, I would definitely recommend that you make this one. So one thing you can do to make this a lot easier is to slice or dice up the veggies ahead of time. So this recipe calls for some diced onions. I'm doing it at the time that I'm making it, but you can definitely, like I said, do this ahead of time. Just dice up all the veggies and kind of make a soup bag, put them all into a Ziploc and put them in the fridge. I'm also dicing up some celery. I always keep celery in my fridge because my kids love to snack on it and I use it for so many different recipes. I'm going to use 2 carrots and then I'm going to grate those. I just kind of like the texture of grated carrots in a soup better than diced. I feel like they cook up a little bit better. I'm also going to smash some garlic, which I'm using my OXO garlic smasher for, or garlic press. I'll link that in the description box below. You just take your veggies, put them in a little bit of oil and butter in a big pot and saute them until they are tender. Next, you're going to add some flour, and this is what's going to end up thickening the soup once you add the liquid in. I'm going to add some chicken broth. I always keep the chicken or the Knorr chicken bouillon on hand and mix that up along with some water. These are the cheese sticks that I'm going to serve with the soup. I got these from Walmart. My kids really love them. And then this is the gnocchi I'm using. It's shelf stable and it's really delicious. I'm going to grate in some fresh nutmeg. You can use regular ground nutmeg if you have it. I'm going to add some pepper. And then once the soup comes to a boil, you want to add the gnocchi. Looking back on this, I feel like I probably could have added 2 packages of gnocchi to it, but once I make it again, maybe I'll do that. I added some half and half also to make the soup creamy. And then this recipe that I wrote calls for shredded rotisserie chicken, which is the easiest, but I actually had some cooked chicken breasts in my fridge, so I went ahead and shredded that in. And then once you add everything to the soup, you just want to let this come to a simmer, and you can let it bubble until the chicken is tender, and the gnocchi is tender also. I cooked the cheese sticks and then continued to season and cook the soup. And then for the spinach part of this, you can leave this out if you really don't like spinach, but I actually don't mind spinach in a soup. The only thing I like to do is I like to take the stems off and then chop it up really fine. It kind of just, kind of melts into the soup and gives it a nice color and obviously some extra fiber in there. And it's traditional, obviously, to what Olive Garden serves. So right at the end, after you, season everything to taste, add in that chopped spinach, and then it's done. So this is our chicken gnocchi soup. Everyone loved this. It's so good. It's very comforting and it makes lots of leftovers. So like I said, highly recommend you make this recipe. Next, we're going to do a chicken quesadilla salad. Like I mentioned before, this is a copycat of the Chili's quesadilla explosion salad. Also, it is made much more simple because there are a lot of components to it. But one of the great things you can do is prep the black bean and corn salsa ahead of time. So I just drained a can of corn and emptied that into a bowl. I'm going to add 1 chopped bell pepper. I'm using red pepper for this because that's what I had on hand, but you can add whatever bell pepper that you have on hand or get at the store. I rinsed and drained a can of black beans, and then I'm going to add that to the bowl as well, along with some lime juice. So one thing I find about making salads like this is that you really have to kind of season them to taste as you go. I also added a little bit of sugar, like a teaspoon or 2, some salt and some pepper. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of olive oil just to kind of bring everything together. And then cilantro. So I like to add a lot of cilantro, but I know that some people don't like cilantro. So if you don't like cilantro, you could add either parsley or green onions or just leave it out altogether. I love cilantro, so like I said, I like to add lots to it. But the one thing I wanted to mention about this particular component of the recipe is that you're going to have extras. You're not going to use it all in the salad recipe, but it's great either eaten plain or on tortilla chips. And then for the dressing, this is super simple. You're just going to take some prepared ranch dressing and whisk it or stir it with some chili powder. If I would have had more time, I probably would have made my ranch dressing from scratch, which is what I typically like to do. But then you just take your chicken breast and marinate it with fajita marinade that you can get at the store. Grill it or cook it on the stove, add it to your chopped lettuce with some tortilla strips and all of the accompaniments and the cheese quesadillas, and it's delicious. So let me know which out of these recipes you are most excited to make, and don't forget, I'll have all of the recipes in a printable linked on my Substack in the description box below. I'm actually posting weekly meal plans over there, so I've been super excited about that. The next one for week 5 is dropping tomorrow, and then I'm also finishing filming up another cooking for 2 video because you guys liked that so much the last time I did it. But if you didn't catch that, I did make a cooking for 2 video since I know so many of you want that type of content. But if you're also not cooking for 2, there's still some delicious recipes in there. I'll leave it on the screen and you can tap on that right here.